A slow, sweeping shot over a sea of ancient pines, their boughs heavy with morning mist, a silent green kingdom that breathes. The camera cuts violently to a splintered, desolate landscape of shattered trunks and blackened earth, the air thick with the smell of death and sawdust. A single, gleaming excavator sits like a metallic predator on a ridge. A man, weathered and grim, stands at the edge of the destruction. His eyes, cold as slate, lock on a single, untouched luxury home gleaming in the distance. He speaks, his voice a low rumble. "They took the mountain. They thought I was gone. They were wrong. Liam was back, but the mountain was not. The winding road, once a canopy-shaded tunnel of dappled sunlight and pine needles, was now a scar of red dirt and tire tracks. The air, which should have smelled of damp earth and crisp fur, was thick with the acrid scent of diesel and a lingering metallic perfume of torn foliage. He felt it before he saw it, a hollowness in his chest that mirrored the gaping hole in the landscape. He rounded the final bend, and his foot instinctively slammed on the brake. The Ford F-150 screeched to a halt, kicking up a plume of dust that coated the shattered stumps like a grim shroud. This wasn't just clear-cutting. This was an annihilation. He'd seen pictures on the news, grainy drone shots of the devastation from 1,000 miles away. But nothing had prepared him for the visceral, gut-wrenching sight of it up close. A jagged 70% bite had been taken out of his childhood. The land his family had owned for generations, the land he had pledged to protect, was gone. He killed the engine and stepped out, the silence a greater shock than the roar of the trucks would have been. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, just a profound unnatural stillness. His family's old cabin, or what was left of it, was little more than a pile of splintered logs and a stone chimney that stood as a lonely monument to a memory. A fresh sign, bold and unfeeling, was hammered into a lone surviving pine at the edge of the property line. Future site of Whispering Pines Estates, a prestigious development by Vance Group. He laughed, a single hollow sound that was swallowed by the emptiness. Whispering Pines, he muttered, the irony like ash in his mouth. There's nothing left to whisper. His phone buzzed. It was his father, Daniel, who was now living in a care home in the valley below. "Liam, you there? You see it?" Liam's throat was tight. He couldn't lie, not to his father. "Yeah, Dad, I see it," she said. She said it was a necessary evil, that it would be good for the local economy. His father's voice, once strong and vibrant, was now thin and reedy. "That woman, Eleanor Vance, she looked me in the eye and said we'd be handsomely compensated." Compensated for what? Liam's voice was a low growl. "For this? They can't pay for this." He squeezed his hand into a fist, his knuckles white. "She played the long game, son. Bought up every parcel around us, squeezed us out. We were the last ones holding on. It was either her price or they'd just build around us and dry up our water rights anyway. The lawyers said it was a checkmate." Liam's chest burned with a furious, righteous heat. "They were wrong, Dad. There's no checkmate here. The game just started." He hung up and began to walk. The ground was treacherous, littered with the debris of a massacre. He stepped over the mangled corpses of maples and oaks, past the root balls ripped from the earth like the gaping wounds of a slain beast. He walked until he reached the development's perimeter fence, a flimsy chain link that felt like a cheap mockery of the boundary it was meant to enforce. The sheer audacity of it all was staggering. She didn't just buy the land. She obliterated it. She saw a pristine, living ecosystem and saw nothing but a plot map for luxury homes. Later that afternoon, he stood in the antiseptic lobby of the Vance Group's regional office in the city below. The air smelled of polished marble and expensive perfume. A young, impeccably dressed receptionist looked up from her screen, her smile a well-practiced curve. "May I help you? I'm here to see Eleanor Vance." She blinked, the smile faltering slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, tell her Liam Rourke is here." "From the mountain." The name seemed to mean something. Her eyes flickered with a hint of uncertainty before she picked up the phone, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Mr. Rourke to see you. He says he's from the mountain. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the account." She listened, nodded, and then hung up, her smile returning, cold and crisp as a winter morning. "Miss Vance is in a meeting. She suggests you contact her legal team regarding any property disputes. Liam stared at her, his jaw set. This isn't a property dispute. It's a land war, and she just started it. He turned and left, the receptionist's baffled expression a small victory. He knew better than to play their game on their terms. He didn't have a team of lawyers or a billion-dollar company. All he had was a lifetime of knowledge about that mountain, a deep-seated fury, and the memory of the trees that were now little more than firewood. The next day, Liam was back on the mountain, but he wasn't looking at the destruction. He was looking at what remained. He followed the thin creek that ran along the property line, the one that had been the subject of his father's final, desperate legal battle. He found what he was looking for, a survey marker buried deep in the ground, a little brass disc he had helped his father plant years ago. The developer's fence was a full 10 feet inside the line. He pulled out a notebook and started making calculations. The clear-cutting hadn't stopped at the legal boundary. It had bled over. They had stolen his property, but they had also committed a crime. He spent the next 2 weeks living out of his truck, a silent ghost in the forest's graveyard. He used his old GPS unit, his father's hand-drawn maps, and his own intimate knowledge of the land to map every discrepancy. He found a spot where the loggers had driven heavy machinery over the protected creek bed, a clear violation of a federal environmental act. He discovered a hidden access road that bisected a rare plant preserve, also illegal. He took pictures. He took notes. He felt the cold, hard resolve solidifying inside him. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, the kind of justice that a lawyer's letter couldn't deliver. Finally, he had enough. He walked back to his truck, a pile of evidence on the passenger seat. As he turned the key, a sleek black Range Rover pulled up behind him, blocking his escape. 2 men in dark suits got out. One was a broad, muscle-bound individual with a shaved head and a scowl. The other was a sharp-faced man holding a clipboard. "Mr. Rourke?" the man with the clipboard said, his voice clipped and professional. "My name is David Thorne. I'm with the Vance Group's security detail. Ms. Vance asked me to deliver this." He held out a slim white envelope. Liam didn't take it. "I've got nothing to say to her." "It's a revised offer," Thorne said, his tone dripping with condescension. "A very generous one. A token of goodwill. She suggests you take it and reconsider your recent activities on private property." Liam's eyes narrowed. "You've been watching me. We're a large company, Mr. Rourke. We're very good at what we do." Liam let out a slow, deliberate breath. He looked past Thorne and saw the mountain, the ravaged land, the stumps like broken teeth. He looked back at Thorne, a silent, powerful intensity burning in his gaze. "Tell your boss to keep her money," Liam said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I don't sell land, and I sure as hell don't sell out." Thorne's jaw tightened. "Listen, buddy, you're getting in over your head. This isn't your mountain anymore. You should just walk away." Liam smiled, a chilling, humorless curve of his lips. "You're right. It's not my mountain anymore." He reached into his truck, grabbed his camera, and held it up. "It's a crime scene." He pointed the camera at Thorne, the flash blinding them both. Thorne swore, stepping back. "You just made a big mistake." Liam simply turned the key in the ignition. He didn't speak again. He just drove away, leaving the 2 men fuming in his rearview mirror. He wasn't going back to his old cabin. He wasn't going to the lawyer's office. He was driving straight to Eleanor Vance's home. The game was no longer being played on their terms. He was going to bring the fight to her front door. He found her mansion on the crest of a different hill, a sprawling architectural masterpiece of glass and steel. He parked his truck in the circular driveway, the beat-up Ford a defiant smudge on the pristine landscape. A butler answered the door, a look of profound distaste on his face. "Yes?" "Tell Eleanor Vance that Liam Rourke is here." He was left standing in the opulent foyer for 10 minutes before she appeared. She was taller than he remembered, a vision in a silk pantsuit, her red hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. Her eyes, the color of emeralds, held a predatory sparkle. "Liam," she said, her voice smooth and patronizing, "I heard you've been causing a fuss. David tells me you're refusing my very generous offer. What is it exactly that you want?" Liam didn't answer. He just pulled out a small, worn piece of paper from his pocket, a folded legal document. The original contract for the land sale, signed by his father, Daniel Rourke. She stared at it, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. What is this? You're not trying to renegotiate, are you? It's a legally binding agreement. Oh, it's binding, Liam said, his voice flat and even. He unfolded the paper and pointed to a single, obscure clause at the bottom, a tiny, italicized section that must have been missed by every lawyer her team had thrown at them. The clause está. The air in the foyer, once heavy with the scent of lilies, now crackled with a silent electric charge. Eleanor Vance's perfectly composed face had fractured, a mask of polished stone shattering to reveal the cold, terrifying fury beneath. Her emerald eyes narrowed, not with fear, but with a glint of genuine, unadulterated hatred. She held the phone, a flawless piece of technology, and her thumb hovered over the screen, scrolling through the images Liam had shown her. She saw the GPS coordinates, the photographic proof, the meticulously documented violations of both the property line and the protected watershed. This is blackmail, she said, her voice a low hiss, devoid of its earlier smooth charm. Liam's smile didn't falter. No, Eleanor. Blackmail is when you ask for something you're not owed. This is me showing you the price of your negligence, a price your company is about to pay, in full. She looked up from the phone, her jaw tight. You have no idea who you're dealing with. These clauses are unenforceable. My legal team will bury you in paperwork until you're a footnote in a class action suit you can't afford to fight. You think this is a legal fight? Liam scoffed, a dark laugh escaping him. This is a PR disaster. This is a news story. A human interest piece about a greedy corporation destroying a family's legacy for a few condos. A story about a CEO who knowingly violated federal environmental laws. You think your investors will be happy with that? He watched her carefully. Her poise was returning, a fragile veneer of control over her seething anger. She was a master of the corporate battlefield, and he had just shown her he wasn't playing by her rules. And how, pray tell, do you plan to get this story to the public? You think CNN is just going to take a call from a man in a muddy pickup truck? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a condescending whisper. I could have you discredited. I could have a team of investigators dig up every little skeleton in your closet, every unpaid parking ticket, every rumor. I'll bury you, Liam. You will wish you had never returned. Funny, he said, the softness of his tone a sharp contrast to her threat. That's exactly what I'm counting on. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in her perfect, sterile foyer. He got back in his truck, the worn fabric of the seat feeling like the most honest thing he'd touched in days. He had just baited a lioness, and he knew without a doubt that she was about to hunt him. The next 24 hours would be a maelstrom. He was right. The first blow came a few hours later, subtle and insidious. His father's care home called. They were having a discussion about his father's residency. Daniel had been expressing agitation and delusional beliefs about his property. The subtle subtext was clear. Eleanor's people were trying to have his father declared mentally incompetent, thereby invalidating any future claims he might make. Liam drove to the care home, his blood running cold. His father was a strong man, but he was old and vulnerable. When Liam arrived, he found Daniel in the common room, a faint tremor in his hands. Liam, his father said, his eyes a little unfocused. That woman, she's calling me crazy. The doctor asked me if I really believed the trees could talk to me. A cold rage, far deeper than the fury he felt on the mountain, settled over Liam. He looked at the doctor, a well-meaning but intimidated man, standing at a distance. Is he a danger to himself or others? Liam asked, his voice low and dangerous. No, of course not. But Mr. Vance's, her company's legal team has been in touch. They're asking for a full mental health evaluation. Liam's eyes held the doctor's. Tell them to send their lawyers. My father's memory is perfectly sound. He remembers every promise that was broken, every tree that was stolen, and he remembers every single word on that contract. We will not be bullied. He knew this was just the first shot. He was one man against a global corporation, and they were hitting him where he was most vulnerable. He needed help. He found it in a small, cramped office downtown, a place that smelled of old paper and lukewarm coffee. The name on the door read, Sarah Jenkins, Investigative Journalist. He'd found her name on a local online news site. A byline on a surprisingly scathing article about the Vance Group's predatory development practices in other parts of the state. He found her poring over a stack of documents, her blonde hair a chaotic mess and a pair of reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up, her expression tired and wary. "Liam Rourke," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "I was expecting your call. Or a restraining order from your friends at the Vance Group." "I don't have friends at the Vance Group," he said, taking a seat. "I have a vendetta. And I think we have something in common." He laid the folder on her desk, the photos, the notes, the old contract. He told her everything, from the history of his family's land to the obscure clause his father had put in the contract and the brazen environmental violations. Sarah listened, her eyes widening with every detail. "I've been on to them for months," she said, leaning forward. "They have a pattern. They buy up land, promise local improvements, then cut corners on environmental regulations. But I've never had proof this solid. This is gold." "It's not about the money," Liam said, his voice flat. "It's about the mountain. And it's about making them pay for what they did." Sarah nodded, a flicker of genuine respect in her eyes. "Okay, this is big. But they're going to come after you, hard. They'll try to silence you, to discredit you. They'll use their entire PR machine." "I know," Liam said. "That's why I came to you. I need you to be my amplifier, my voice, my truth." Over the next few days, they worked in a feverish frenzy. Sarah drafted an article, meticulously cross-referencing every detail, every GPS coordinate, every violation. Liam provided her with more photos, old family albums showing the forest in its prime, and his father's meticulously hand-drawn maps of the property. As they prepared, Eleanor's counterattack began. A local television news channel ran a segment on the Whispering Pines estates, a glowing soft focus piece that highlighted the eco-friendly design and the jobs it would bring to the community. They interviewed a paid spokesperson for the Vance Group who spoke with practiced sincerity about their commitment to preserving natural beauty, while a drone shot showed the clear-cut land, framed as a canvas for future innovation. The segment ended with a subtle jab, a quick mention of a local landowner with a history of refusing fair offers who is now attempting to strong-arm the company for personal gain. Liam watched it on a laptop in Sarah's office, his jaw clenched. "They're trying to paint me as the villain." "It's classic corporate PR," Sarah said, typing furiously. "Spin the narrative before the truth gets out. They're trying to make people suspicious of you, so when our story hits, they won't believe it." "So what do?" Liam asked. "We play their game, and we do it better," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "We don't go to the local news. We go straight to the top. I have contacts at a national news site. They're bigger, they're not afraid of Vance, and they love a good David vs. Goliath story." That night, Liam's phone buzzed with an unknown number. He answered it. It was David Thorne, Eleanor's head of security. "Mr. Rourke?" Thorne's voice was a low, menacing rumble. "We've been very patient. You're causing problems. The offer is off the table. Now, my boss is a reasonable woman. But if you keep pushing this, things can get very messy. For you, and for those you care about." Liam felt a fresh wave of ice-cold fury. They were threatening his father now. "You think you can scare me? You have no idea." "Don't confuse courage with stupidity, Rourke," Thorne said. "You're one man. We're an army, and we're about to make an example of you." The line went dead. Liam stood there, his hands shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure and so cold it felt like a physical entity. He was a single soldier in a war he had started, but he knew what to do. He looked at Sarah, who was finishing up a final edit. "Send it," he said, his voice hard. "Send the whole damn thing." An hour later, as a cool night settled over the city, Liam was sitting in his truck outside his father's care home, watching the windows. He had a flask of coffee and a shotgun he had brought from the mountain tucked under his seat. He wouldn't let them hurt his father. Inside her mansion, Eleanor Vance was celebrating. The PR blitz had worked. The local news was covering her in a glowing light. Her investors were reassured. The problem, Liam Rourke, would soon be a distant, unpleasant memory. She was toasting her success with a glass of expensive champagne when her phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. She picked it up, a slight victorious smile on her lips, and froze. The headline was simple, devastating, and everywhere. Vance Group CEO accused of widespread environmental crimes. Lawsuit from local landowner cites illegal clear-cuting. She clicked the link. The article was a masterpiece of journalism. It had Liam's name, his father's story, and every single damning piece of evidence he had collected. But the worst part was the final line, a single, terrifying sentence that made the champagne glass slip from her trembling fingers and shatter on the polished marble floor. A spokesperson for the Vance Group declined to comment, but sources close to the story say this is just the beginning. The clatter of the shattered champagne glass on the marble floor was the only sound in Eleanor Vance's opulent foyer. She stared at the liquid seeping into the pristine white rug, her mind racing. The headline, a black-and-white accusation, seemed to mock the celebratory mood she had been in just moments before. A spokesperson for the Vance Group declined to comment. The phrase was a public admission of defeat. It was a sign that her carefully constructed narrative had failed, that the truth, ugly and unvarnished, had broken through her perfect PR campaign. The fear that had briefly flickered in her eyes was now replaced by a cold, searing rage. She was not a woman who lost. She picked up her phone, the same one Liam had shown her the damning evidence on, and her fingers moved with a furious precision. "Get me Robert Sterling! Now," she bit into the receiver, her voice a low growl. "And cancel every single one of my meetings for the next 2 days. I don't care about the board. I don't care about the investors. I want that man's life ruined, and I want that woman's career in ashes. Do you understand me? I want a scorched earth campaign, no mercy, no prisoners." Within minutes, the vast, humming corporate engine of the Vance Group sprang into action. A leviathan of legal and financial power roused from its slumber. Robert Sterling, the company's lead litigator, was a man whose entire career was built on burying opposition under mountains of paperwork and financial pressure. He listened to Eleanor's tirade, his voice calm and methodical. "Understood, Eleanor. We will hit him with a defamation suit so large it will cripple him for life. We will subpoena every document he's ever owned. We will attack his character, his past, his motives. We will leak every single negative detail to friendly media outlets. By the time we're done, he won't have a penny to his name, and no one will believe a word he says." And they did. The lawsuit landed on Liam's doorstep 2 days later, delivered by a man in a crisp suit and a sneer. The document was a masterpiece of legal intimidation. It demanded $10 million in damages for defamation, libel, and slander, claiming that Liam's unfounded and malicious accusations had caused irreparable harm to the Vance Group's reputation and its stock price. It was a bluff, a psychological weapon designed to terrify him into submission. He stood in the tiny, sterile apartment he was renting, the papers feeling like a physical weight in his hands. Simultaneously, the pressure on Sarah Jenkins began. Her editor, a nervous man named Arthur, called her into his office. He held a legal notice from the Vance Group, a thinly veiled threat of a lawsuit if the article wasn't retracted. "Sarah, you know I believe you," he said, wringing his hands. "But this is a different level. We're a small online publication. We can't afford to fight a firm like Sterling and Associates. They'll bankrupt us." "They're bluffing, Arthur. We have the evidence," Sarah argued, her voice full of a desperate, furious energy. "We have the GPS data, the photos. It's all real. I know," he yelled, his frustration boiling over. "But their argument isn't about the truth. It's about power. They'll use discovery to bury you. They'll drag your name through the mud. They'll make sure you can never get another job in this industry." The conversation ended with a compromise that felt like a defeat. The article would stay online, but the headline would be changed to a more passive one, and all mentions of criminal activity would be softened to alleged and disputed. It was a small victory, but it felt hollow. Eleanor was hitting them, not with a sledgehammer, but with 1,000 tiny pins, each designed to drain their resolve. Liam felt the walls closing in. The defamation suit, frivolous as it was enough to make lawyers hesitant to take his case. He spent his days in dusty law offices being turned away with practiced apologies. He was a small, insignificant rock against a corporate tidal wave. The threats against his father also escalated. The care home staff began to receive anonymous calls, concerns about Liam's unstable influence on his father. A social worker was assigned to Daniel's case, her presence a constant, low-level threat that he could be deemed unfit to care for himself and be placed in a state-run facility. The stress was taking a toll. Liam found himself back on the mountain, not for evidence this time, but for sanity. He stood at the edge of the clear-cut, the scent of diesel and decay thick in the air. He felt helpless, his righteous anger turning into a bitter, impotent despair. He had done everything right. He had played by the rules. He had found the truth, and he had exposed it, but it hadn't been enough. He sat on a felled log, his head in his hands. He felt like he had failed his father, failed the mountain, failed himself. He had thought that truth and justice would win. He had forgotten that in the world of the ultra-rich, those things were just commodities, to be bought and sold and buried when it was convenient. As the sun began to set, he heard a sound behind him, a crunch of gravel. He looked up, his hand going to the hunting knife he still carried with him. It wasn't a car, though. It was a man walking slowly toward him. He was older, with a weather-beaten face and tired eyes. He wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans, and he carried a worn notebook. "You're Liam Rourke, aren't you?" the man said, his voice calm and steady. "I've been following the story. Saw your article. Heard about what they did to your mountain. Who are you?" Liam asked, his voice guarded. "Name's Gus," the man said. He gestured to the devastation around them. "I was one of the loggers. I was on the crew that cut these trees down." Liam's jaw tightened. "So you're the ones who did this?" "We were just following orders," Gus said, his tone devoid of apology, simply stating a fact. "But that's not why I'm here. I saw the article and I saw what they were saying about you. I saw them trying to paint you as a liar. It's a load of crap." He walked closer, his eyes scanning the destruction. "We were told to cut up to the line and no more. We're professionals." But then Eleanor Vance herself came out here. She walked the land with her project manager, and she gave them a new order, said the survey was off and that the company had negotiated new terms with the original owner. She told them to push the line back. "By 20 feet!" Liam stared at him, his mind racing. 20 feet. That was a direct violation, not a mistake. That was an order. "You have proof of that?" Gus shook his head. "No, but I have proof of something else. Something much, much bigger." He held up his notebook, his hands trembling slightly. "Vance Group doesn't just cut corners on environmental regulations. They've been using a separate fund to pay off local zoning officials, city council members, even state inspectors to look the other way on environmental impact reports. The money is paid out through a shell corporation, a bunch of fake invoices for consulting services." Liam felt a fresh jolt of adrenaline, of hope. "You have proof of this?" "I have copies of the payroll," Gus said, his eyes meeting Liam's. "They were paying me for my logging work, but a few months ago they asked me to do some side work for them. I was a driver. I delivered envelopes with cash in them to the houses of local officials. I took pictures. I wrote down names. It was all so simple. They thought they were being clever, but they were sloppy." Gus opened his notebook and showed him a list, a terrifying, detailed log of dates, names, addresses, and the amounts of cash delivered. "I was just doing it for the extra money at first," he said, his voice quiet. "But then I saw what they were doing to the mountain, and I saw how they were treating you on the news. I don't like bullies, and I don't like liars. This isn't just about one mountain, is it? It's about a whole network of corruption. And Eleanor Vance is at the center of it all." Liam stared at the notebook, his mind spinning. The defamation suit, the threats to his father, the legal maneuvering. It all suddenly seemed so small. Eleanor Vance hadn't just deforested a mountain. She had built her entire empire on a foundation of bribery and corruption. This wasn't a land war anymore. This was something else entirely. This was a criminal investigation. He had been looking for justice, but what he had just found was a way to bring down an entire kingdom. He looked up from the notebook to the man who had just handed him a bomb. "Why are you giving this to me?" Liam asked, his voice barely a whisper. Gus shrugged, a weary, knowing look on his face. Because you're the one who's already got her attention. And because I'm just a working man. I don't know the first thing about fighting a war like this. But you do. As the last light of day faded, Liam looked at the list of names, a horrifying and beautiful map of corruption. The defamation suit was a lie, a distraction. Eleanor thought she was winning, that she had him cornered. She thought he was fighting for a piece of land. She was wrong. He wasn't just fighting for the mountain anymore. He was fighting for an entire network of truth. Liam's hands trembled as he held the worn notebook, the weight of it feeling less like paper and more like a live grenade. The names, the dates, the amounts, it wasn't just a list. It was a map of an entire corrupted system, a network of influence that stretched from the clear cut on his mountain to the city council chambers and state environmental agencies. He looked up at Gus, the man who had just handed him the key to the entire kingdom. Why? Liam asked again, his voice raw with disbelief. Gus shrugged, his face a mask of weary resignation. Because I got out. I quit. I couldn't be a part of it anymore. My conscience. It got to me. I saw what they did to your mountain. Then I saw what they were doing to you on the news. I don't know the first thing about fighting a corporation. But you do. Liam knew he couldn't take the notebook to the local police. The names on the list included the head of the zoning commission and a state environmental inspector. He had no idea how deep the corruption ran. He was a single man with a notebook full of accusations, up against a company that had just proven it could manipulate the media and the legal system with a single phone call. We need to go somewhere safe, Liam said, his mind racing. He looked at the vast, broken landscape behind Gus, then to the winding road back to the city. Now. They drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, a place so anonymous it felt invisible. Liam called Sarah from a burner phone he had bought that morning. Sarah, it's me. Don't say my name. Just listen. She heard the urgency in his voice and responded with a professional quietness. I'm listening. I have proof of everything. Bigger than the mountain. It's a network of corruption, bribery, payoffs. I have a list of names. City officials, state inspectors. All paid by the Vance Group to look the other way. I can't go to the police here. They're probably on the payroll. There was a long silence on the other end, and for a terrifying moment, Liam thought she had hung up. Then she spoke, her voice a low, fierce whisper. Don't go anywhere. Don't call anyone. Don't trust anyone. I'm coming to you. Send me the address, now. He sent her the location, and a few minutes later, the line went dead. He looked at Gus, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. You understand what you've done, Gus? Liam said. You've put a target on your back. They will come for you. They will come for us both. I know, Gus said, his eyes still closed. But at least now I can sleep at night. As they waited, the storm from Eleanor intensified. Liam's original phone, the one he had left in his truck, buzzed with a relentless series of missed calls from a blocked number. The defamation lawsuit was now front-page news in the local paper, complete with a mugshot-like photo of Liam from his driver's license, taken without his permission. The article spun a web of false accusations, painting him as a disgraced former land baron with a history of environmental recklessness and a personal vendetta against the Vance Group. The PR machine was in full, malevolent swing trying to discredit him before he could speak again. The worst part came when a police cruiser pulled up to his father's care home. A uniformed officer entered, speaking to the administrator with a serious expression. Liam, watching from a distance, felt a cold knot of dread form in his stomach. They were escalating their threats, using the law as a weapon. What if they try to hurt him? Gus asked, his voice shaking. They won't, Liam said, but he didn't believe it. He had to act fast. Sarah arrived an hour later, pulling up to the motel in an unmarked car. She rushed into the room, her face pale, but her eyes burning with a fierce, professional intensity. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Give it to me, she said, holding out her hand. Liam handed her the notebook. She flipped through the pages, her journalistic instincts taking over. She recognized names. A city councilman she had always suspected of being on the take. A building inspector who had been suspiciously quiet on a recent project. She took a deep breath, her own hands trembling. "This is big," she said, looking up at him. "This isn't just about a mountain anymore. This is a RICO case. This is a criminal conspiracy. What do we do now?" Liam asked. "We don't go to the police," she said, confirming his fear. "Not here. They'll just bury it. They'll lose the evidence. They'll give Eleanor time to get to Gus. We need to go to someone outside their reach. A federal contact. I have a source at the Attorney General's office, a woman who specializes in environmental crimes. She's tenacious, and she's clean." As she spoke, Liam's old phone rang again. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. He answered it, putting it on speaker. "You're a very foolish man, Liam," a voice said, a voice he knew all too well. It was Eleanor Vance, her tone dripping with venomous amusement. "You think you can hide from me? You think a few little lies in a newspaper can hurt me? I own this town. I have eyes and ears everywhere. I know you're at the motel. I know you've been talking to the logger. I know everything." Sarah's eyes widened. "She's tapping your phone." Liam ignored her, his eyes locked on the speaker. "You don't own me, Eleanor. You don't own this mountain, and you don't own the truth." "The truth is whatever I say it is," she said, her voice turning cold as ice. "And the truth is, you're a fraud. A bitter man who couldn't protect his property and now he's lashing out. My lawyers are going to have a field day with you. They've found a way to link your father's past business dealings to a few, shall we say, less than ethical practices. And the best part? The media is going to eat it up." Liam's face went white. He had no idea what she was talking about. His father was an honest man. He felt a sickening twist of fear in his gut. "You're bluffing," he said, his voice a little too shaky. "Am I?" she asked, her voice a purr. "I've got the dirt, Liam, and I'm going to leak it. I'm going to destroy your father's legacy, just like you tried to destroy mine. It's the ultimate checkmate. You can't attack me without hurting the man you're trying to protect. You either walk away now or I release everything." She hung up, the line going dead. Liam stared at the phone, his mind reeling. Eleanor had found his weakness. His father was his Achilles heel. He had been so focused on protecting him from physical harm, he hadn't considered the psychological warfare. The thought of his father's reputation being dragged through the mud, his legacy destroyed by a lie, was a gut punch. "We have to stop her," he said, turning to Sarah. "We have to do something. We can't let her do this." "We can't," Sarah said, her own face etched with grim determination. "This is it, Liam, the end game. We have to beat her to the punch. We're going to use this threat against her. We're going to leak our information to the Attorney General, and then we're going to leak the fact that we've done it to the press. We'll make it impossible for her to get to your father without bringing down her entire empire. We'll show her that if she pulls the trigger on you, she's pulling the trigger on herself." "What if it doesn't work?" Gus asked, his voice trembling. "Then we all go down together," Sarah said, but her eyes held a defiant glint. "And we take her with us." Liam looked at the notebook, then at Sarah, then at Gus. He had found an army. A tiny, desperate, but powerful army of two. They were fighting for the truth. He grabbed the burner phone and called the editor who had censored Sarah's article. "Arthur," Liam said, his voice a low, steady rumble. "You remember that article? You remember how you said you were afraid to publish the truth? Well, I have something for you now. Something that will make your career or end it. It's your choice. I'm going to send you a draft. And if you publish it, I will give you the one thing that will end Eleanor Vance forever." He looked at Sarah, a silent agreement passing between them. They were no longer fighting a war on the ground. They were fighting a war of information, a war of consequences. The ball was in her court now. The next morning, Eleanor woke to the sound of her phone ringing, a frantic, insistent shrill. It was Robert Sterling, her lead litigator. His voice was laced with a panic she had never heard before. "Eleanor," he said, his voice a gasp. "It's all over the news. They just released the names. The Attorney General's office has announced a full criminal investigation, and we have a new problem. A major newspaper just ran a story, not about you or Liam, but about something else. Something we've been trying to keep quiet for years. A series of bribes from our company. A list of local officials." Eleanor listened, her mind going blank with horror. She had played him. She had tried to bait him with a lie about his father, and in doing so, she had revealed her hand. She had inadvertently told him about the very thing he needed to expose her. She had been so confident, so sure of her victory. She never expected him to have his own ace up his sleeve. And now, as a new headline flashed across her television screen, announcing a full criminal investigation into the Vance Group's illicit activities, she realized the devastating truth. He had not just come back for the mountain. He had come back for her, and he was winning. The phone dropped from Eleanor's hand and hit the plush carpet with a muffled thud. The champagne glass, already shattered on the marble floor, was a prophet of what was to come. Robert Sterling's frantic, gasping voice was the first domino. The news alert on her television screen was the second. The silence that followed, a terrifying void where the roar of her corporate machine used to be, was the third. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument of ruthless logic, tried to process the information, but it was too much, too fast. The Attorney General, a criminal investigation, a list of names, a series of bribes. Liam had done it. He had not just fought her. He had outplayed her. He hadn't just used the one weakness she exposed. He had used it to tear down the entire foundation of her power. For a moment, she stood motionless, a statue of disbelief. Then the shock gave way to a cold, crystalline fury. This wasn't about a lawsuit or a PR battle anymore. This was a war. And her enemy had just gone from an annoyance to a genuine threat. Her face, which had been so carefully composed for so long, twisted into a snarl. She was a cornered animal, and she would show no mercy. She didn't call Robert Sterling back. She didn't call her board. She called David Thorne, her head of security. His voice was a flat, obedient monotone. "What are your orders, Eleanor?" "Eleanor," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "He has a witness. The logger. His name is Gus. Find him. And find Liam Rourke. And I want the old man, the father. I want him." "Eleanor," Thorne said, a hint of concern in his voice. "We can't. That's a crossing of a line we haven't." "There are no lines left." She shrieked into the phone. "My company is being investigated. My name is being dragged through the mud." "You find them, Thorne. You get that old man. You make them regret the day they were born." "I don't care what you have to do." Thorne didn't say anything, but she heard the click of the phone. He had accepted his orders. She was not the queen of her empire anymore. She was the commander of a private army. She walked over to her desk and pulled out a bottle of scotch. She poured herself a drink, her hand trembling so badly she spilled it on her expensive wooden desk. She stared at the puddle, her mind racing. Liam thought he had won. He was a fool. He had given her a reason to abandon all pretense of civility. He had given her a reason to go for the one thing that mattered most to him. His father. She was right. The phone at the motel, the one Liam had been using, rang again. It was Thorne. "We have an issue, Eleanor," he said, his voice clipped and professional. "The old man is under police guard. We can't get to him." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "A police officer showed up about an hour ago," Thorne said. "Claimed he was a friend of the family. He's sitting in the waiting room with a coffee and a newspaper. He's not leaving." "It's a setup." "A setup?" she growled. "Who set it up? Who is he?" "We don't know yet," Thorne said. "But our sources say he's part of an internal affairs team. The Attorney General's office. They're on to us, Eleanor. They know we're coming." Eleanor slammed her fist on the table. He was still outmaneuvering her. He had anticipated her move and had protected his father. He was a step ahead of her, and it was a humiliation she couldn't stand. "Then find the witness," she said, her voice a low, terrifying whisper. "Find the logger, and find Liam Rourke. He has the notebook. I want it back, and I want him silenced. Permanently." Thorne did not hesitate this time. "Understood, Eleanor." Meanwhile, at the motel, Liam, Sarah, and Gus were in a feverish state. They were monitoring the news, watching as the story of the Vance Group's corruption went viral. The national newspaper had published the entire list of names, and the Attorney General's office had issued a public statement confirming their investigation. The dam had broken. But the victory felt hollow. They knew Eleanor was now a wounded animal, and wounded animals were the most dangerous. "We have to get out of here," Sarah said, her eyes scanning the parking lot through the blinds. "She knows we're here. The phones. She must have bugged them. She threatened to release something about my father." Liam said, his voice flat. Something about his past. I don't know what she's talking about, but she was going to use it against him. It's a lie, Gus said, his voice trembling. Your father's a good man. He's the one who wrote that clause in the contract. He was always worried about the mountain. He said the trees were his friends. Liam didn't answer. He was lost in thought, a new plan forming in his mind. He looked at Sarah, a flicker of something new in his eyes. It was no longer about revenge or justice. It was about ending this. Once and for all, we need to get to the mountain, he said. The original contract, the deed. It's hidden in the old cabin. She won't know about it. She won't think to look for it there. If we can get that, it's all the proof we need to expose her fraud in court. And it's the one thing that proves my father's integrity. Liam, that's crazy, Sarah said. It's the first place they'll look for you. No, Liam said, shaking his head. It's the last place they'll expect me to go. She thinks I'm a coward. She thinks I'm on the run. She thinks I'll hide. She'll be watching the roads, the airports. She won't expect me to go back to the one place that has already cost me everything. Gus nodded, a grim smile on his face. He's right. It's a good place to hide. The old trails, they'll never find us there. They drove a circuitous route, avoiding major roads and doubling back on themselves. They left the car in a small hidden turnoff and began to walk. The clear cut was a horrifying sight in the moonlight. The stumps of trees looked like the bones of a skeleton, stark and desolate. The air was thick with the smell of decay. As they walked, Liam felt a profound sense of loss, a pain that was physical and raw. She didn't just cut the trees, Gus said, his voice a low whisper. She took the soul of this place. As they reached the old cabin, a small, rustic structure built by his grandfather, Liam's blood went cold. The door was ajar. They weren't the first ones here. They walked inside, their flashlights illuminating the dusty, silent interior. The place was a mess. Drawers were pulled out, furniture was overturned, and the floor was littered with debris. Eleanor had been here. She knew, Liam whispered. She knew about the cabin. She knew I would come back for the original contract. Then she's coming, Sarah said, her voice taut with tension. She's coming for us. Now. They heard the sound of a truck outside, a low, menacing rumble. They extinguished their flashlights and hid in the shadows. The truck door slammed, and they heard the crunch of feet on the gravel. David Thorne. He's here, Liam whispered, his hand going to the hunting knife at his hip. And he's not alone. Thorne, you're a dead man, a voice shouted from the darkness. Liam froze. It was Eleanor. She had come herself. She had underestimated him once, but she wouldn't do it again. She had come for the final bloody confrontation. I know you're in here, Liam, she yelled, her voice echoing through the desolate clearing. I've brought a surprise for you. A horrifying sound. The whirring of a chainsaw began to cut through the night. The sound grew louder, closer, more sinister. The sound of a final act of violence, aimed at the last thing Liam had left. His family's cabin. She's going to burn it all down, Gus whispered, his voice full of fear. She's going to destroy the last memory of your father. You're not going to win, Eleanor. Liam yelled, his voice full of a desperate, furious energy. You're not going to get away with this. I'm not trying to get away with anything, she laughed, a high, chilling sound in the darkness. I'm making sure you lose everything you have left. Just like I lost everything I had. You have a choice, Liam. You come out now, and I let your father live. Or I burn this cabin to the ground and I make sure his legacy is dust and ash. Liam looked at Sarah, his face pale with a terrifying realization. Eleanor wasn't bluffing. She was a woman who had already lost everything, and now she was willing to take them all down with her. The chainsaw screamed to life and the first cut was made. Liam's mind flashed back to the clear cut, the stumps of trees, the devastation. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't let her win. He ran from the cabin, a low growl escaping his throat. Here I am, Eleanor. I'm here! Come and get me! He ran straight for the sound of the chainsaw, a desperate final act of defiance. He was a single man against a powerful, violent woman, and he had nothing to lose. He ran, and in the distance he heard a sound that chilled him to the bone. It was the sound of a siren. Eleanor Vance! A voice boomed from the darkness. This is the police. Put your hands in the air. Eleanor's laugh turned into a gasp of horror. The sirens grew louder, their lights flashing through the trees. The chainsaw stopped. The sound of running feet filled the air. She was a cornered animal, and she knew she had nowhere to run. She turned, her face a mask of disbelief. "No," she whispered. "No, I won't." She had planned this meticulously. She had thought of everything, but she hadn't planned on the one thing Liam had left her with. The truth. The truth that had landed her in a corner with a police investigation, a witness, and a man who had nothing left to lose. As the police lights illuminated the scene, Eleanor Vance stood frozen in the middle of the clear cut, the chainsaw still in her hand. Her perfect facade was gone. Her empire was crumbling. She was a broken, terrified woman standing on the very land she had destroyed, her final act of vengeance thwarted by the